Episode 6 of The Last of Us. We are getting into the thick of it.
Winter has come at last.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. Let me move this over real quick so it's a better view. Gotta look presentable for this situation. So last night I watched episode 6 of Last of Us, consisting of Joel reuniting with Tommy, him deciding that he actually wants to protect Ellie, even though he's scared of losing another child again like he did with Sarah many years ago. Ending with a cliffhanger, which we all know how Ellie feels about those. This show is just getting progressively more emotional as each episode goes on. There's not a whole lot of huge deviations from the game in this episode. There are some things that are slightly altered or changed, but for the most part it does stay consistent with the overall vibe or overall anchor points that the original story has. Joel reuniting with Tommy, telling him about Ellie's immunity, and instead of surprisingly running into him when they're trying to cut through that power plant, they're discovered by a group of people that are from Jackson, and they have a dog that can smell if they're infected or not. And he starts to freak, wondering, is this dog gonna sense that she got bit? But within about 2 seconds, he hears her laughing and she's just playing with the dog. I felt the same way Joel felt in that moment. I thought, oh God, please, 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 don't bark, don't bark, don't bark, don't bark. Oh my God, I just remembered that opening scene with Graham Greene. No. Okay, rewind with me. At this point in the episode, 3 months after Henry and Sam, Joel and Ellie run into this married couple somewhere out, I guess it's in Wyoming, somewhere outside of Jackson. Both original characters, one of them played by Graham Greene, who you might know as Kicking Bird from Dances with Wolves. Joel asks him if he's heard of the Fireflies or if he knows his brother Tommy out in Jackson. He and his wife don't really seem to know anything other than the fact that you can't go along the River of Death because it's not a good place to go. Not just infected, but a group of people out there that you don't want to cross, and I can only assume that he's referring to David and his group of cannibals. Yeah, we all know what's coming with that if we've played the game. But for anyone who hasn't, I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens. I'll leave that for the next couple episodes to tell you. But it's the first time in this episode we get to see Joel's vulnerability once they leave the house. And it looks like he's having a heart attack, or maybe it's a panic attack. Ellie asks if he's okay, and he just shrugs it off like it's nothing. But eventually, when he goes to Tommy, it's not really that shocking because we can all read Joel like a book, I would assume. He's afraid of losing another child again like he lost Sarah. When Tommy asks Joel how things are going, he initially lies about Tess, saying that she's fine. He acts like nothing's bothering him. He has somewhat of an argument with Tommy when he finds out that he's going to be a dad, something that we never saw in the original game. Slight departure, but a good change, I think, nonetheless. Tommy's got some responsibilities. He can't exactly leave Jackson to go into some area that he's not really sure about. We had some of that in the original game where he felt a commitment to Jackson to protect it. In this one, I would say it's more complete, if that makes any sense. And that's not to dismiss the first game at all. It just makes it more clear. The thing that I really like about this episode, and I've heard other people mention this, they're already laying the seeds of foundation for Last of Us Part 2 when it eventually happens. Now, will that happen in Season 2 or Season 3 or maybe a little further down the line? We'll get to that another time, but we get to see a full look of Jackson and how much of a thriving community it is. We saw a couple of glimpses of it in the first game, but it wasn't until Part 2 that we actually got to see a full look behind the curtain. Young kids watching movies at night, like The Goodbye Girl with Richard Dreyfuss. It was so weird. Little sidetrack. I think that movie came out not too long after the original Jaws. And when I heard Richard Dreyfuss' voice, I thought, come on, Opa, hurry it up, Opa, tie it on. They celebrate Christmas. They go to eat in restaurants in the town. It's basically an attempt to give people a semblance of the normality that they had before the apocalypse happened. Unfortunately, it's basically a giant veil because the world outside the walls, well, we all know how messed up it is. Another seed for Last of Us Part 2 is when Joel and Ellie are given a meal and Maria and Tommy are talking to them. Ellie looks off and sees this girl staring at her from afar and says, "What?" Could be totally wrong about this, but the moment I saw her, I thought, that's Dina, isn't it? Be a hell of a coincidence if it wasn't. We also see the horse that Ellie and Dina ride on in Part 2 into Seattle. Shimmer. More Easter eggs for you for Last of Us Part 2. Just a sidebar real quick. Do I think that Season 2 will be an adaptation of Last of Us Part 2? It could be. I know some people are assuming that's what's going to happen. I hope that they don't do that, at least not right away. I would like them to save that for a later season and maybe delve more into the 5-year time gap that takes place between the events of Part 1 and Part 2, the main events mostly of Part 2. That'd probably be a better choice because if there is a chance of a Last of Us Part 3, it would give Neil Druckmann enough time to come up with something that he might have in mind for Last of Us Part 3, because I know some articles have come out saying that he would probably assume that it's probably the end with Part 2. If that's the case, I wouldn't have a problem with that. There's some of us, this guy included, that would like to see a Part 3. Plus, he also believes that there's more story to tell, so I'd be really surprised if he didn't have at least something else in mind. Anyway, back to episode 6. I like that we get more time with Maria. We get to learn more about her, that she was a district attorney, and she tells Ellie about Sarah, which makes it more clear for Ellie why Joel is the way he is. And she gives Ellie this warning that I think is a really good provocation, if that's the right way to say what she says to Joel when they finally have the confrontation about should he stay with her or not. She says something like, the ones who we love the most are the ones who betray us, so be careful with who you put your trust in. She's not entirely wrong, but she's not entirely right either. Because if you play both games, you can kind of see where I'm coming from. Gonna try to be vague in case anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about if you haven't played the games. And then when Joel finally confesses to Tommy what he's been feeling this whole time...
You can't tell anyone. Not even Maria. Tommy, you're the only one I trust. If anyone else sees those bites on her, what's under her skin, they'll shoot her. It's the last thing I'll ever ask of you.
I tried really hard not to cry when he pours his heart out to Tommy. He's getting close to Ellie and he's starting to love her like she's his own child. Not the only one to say this. Pedro Pascal sells the hell out of this. If he's in consideration for an Emmy or Golden Globe nomination of any kind, please at least give him something. I really like him as the Mandalorian and some of the small parts he had in other shows like NYPD Blue, and I absolutely love Troy Baker as Joel. But Pedro Pascal adds a different layer of emotion to Joel that we never saw beforehand. This has been building up throughout the entire season by far. When Joel sees the soldiers ready to shoot Ellie, he gets a flashback to Sarah and unloads on that guy, killing him with his bare knuckles, laughing at her stupid dad jokes that she reads from the pun book, having small talk with her, and then getting worried that she was going to get attacked by that dog when they got stopped outside of Jackson. But because he's gotten so used to closing off people for 20 years, he doesn't want to experience that pain again. And it's even more poignant when he sees that young girl in the town square of Jackson with a haircut just like Sarah's, with her own child. I guess you could say in a way, the spirit of Sarah is still hovering around Joel in some capacity, trying to give him some guidance and reassurance. Probably reading too much into it, but that's how I interpret it at least. And the eventual confrontation happens. Slight variation of it, but for the most part, it's basically chapter and verse. And I think it's just as powerful as it was in the original game.
So don't tell me that I'd be safe with somebody else, because the truth is, I would just be more scared.
And without even giving Tommy an option, he decides to show up and steal the horse, probably knowing that Ellie was going to choose him over Tommy anyway. Ellie doesn't even think about it. She decides, yeah, I'm going with you. And we get the same small talk that they had in the original game where they're talking about football, explaining what's a turnover and first down, and how people went to college trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. What they wanted to do with their lives. And Joel tells Ellie how he wanted to be a singer and how he wants to raise a sheep farm. Another little Easter egg for Last of Us Part 2 for you. I know it sounds like I'm sticking it to the haters of Last of Us Part 2 out there, but I really think that game is way, way better than most people give it credit for. I don't mean to keep bringing it up, but I feel like somebody has to stick up for it. They arrive at the college, no fireflies. And no infected either. I know some people would probably want more infected in each episode. I wouldn't mind if there was at least 1 or 2 here and there walking around. Maybe give them some kind of tension. But I get it that you don't want to overwhelm the audience with infected because really at its core, The Last of Us is about the people in it. The infected are just this background antagonist that shows up every once in a while. So they find where the Fireflies have gone to Salt Lake City, and they hear the Raiders coming, which we all know who they report to. And I was curious to see how they were gonna play Joel getting hurt in this one, because if you remember in the original game, he gets into a struggle with one of the Raiders on this balcony. He falls over and lands on this pipe, which impales him right through his stomach. In this one, when he and Ellie are trying to sneak away on their horse, a Raider comes up from behind and gets into a fight with Joel, and he kills him by breaking his neck. And then he looks down and sees this big railroad-looking spike right in his stomach. That caught me for a loop. Even though I knew something was coming, I didn't expect it to happen that way. And it ends with Joel passing out once they get further enough away from the Raiders, which in true storytelling fashion ends on a cliffhanger. I might have said that episode 3 was the most emotionally raw of the season so far. This one takes that spot. And I think episode 7 will do the same thing next week. Because if you've seen the preview for it, it's called Left Behind. Anyone who's played the DLC Left Behind for the first Last of Us, we all know what that entails, but for anyone who doesn't, without being too specific, it explains how Ellie got bit. Wonder if that's going to be the entirety of the episode, maybe with a couple of spots of Ellie trying to keep Joel alive, like it was in the DLC. But we'll find out next week, won't we? That's all I got to say about episode 6. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this episode. Are you excited for the next episode? What was your favorite scene in this episode? What's your favorite episode of the show by far? I think if I had to pick, it would probably be this one and episode 5. Nah, I'm actually going to go with episode 6. Yeah, definitely episode 6. So far, at least. Thank you guys once again. I'll see you in the next one.